8:46.
A little something for the weekend with Sam Hunt.
Something for the weekend. Always a pleasure on a Friday. Sam Hunt. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Wammo. How are you?
Good. Last Friday actually feels like a long time ago. I don't know why this week's...
Well, I know. Well, in my case, I told you last week about that running on the spot thing that I had.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that may have delayed time. Did you try a bit of that, did you?
Did you go back in time with it? Would you jog backwards or something?
Well, it's very strange. You think you're standing still, but you're in fact going backwards. You're quite right. But I've given it up now. I found that I was doing the ceiling.
Oh, yeah, well, because you've got a low ceiling there, yeah?
Well, it's actually a low ceiling. It's just that I jump high.
Well, you're very tall.
I'm very tall,
Yeah.
and I jump with a certain spring. But it's been a good week, actually. I've, apart from anything else, a couple of new arrivals.
Oh, I didn't know you were expecting.
Exactly, no, nor did I. But I did. I received. I thought Jimi Hendrix had gone a long time ago, but I just got his new album.
Oh, he's back.
Valleys of Neptune. It's one they've discovered and just released.
I'm always suspicious of the ones they just discover and release.
Yeah, well, I'm not. There's some great stuff on this. Very good.
Because I always think, well, if the artist didn't release them first time round...
You didn't get a chance, though, in Jimi Hendrix's case, because he died so young and
true.
quickly, I guess. I don't know. It's good. And the other one, I've talked about a Scottish poet whose work I love, and I've done some of the poems on our program before. Tracy Hurd from Dundee.
Yeah.
Well, in the mail yesterday, I received from Dundee. I don't know where it came from. In fact, her volume, because she is a red-headed woman from photographs. You can see she's a red-headed woman, and her volume is called Dead Redhead, and it's a great book. It's published by Blood Axe Books. And it's on the cover. It's got the painting by quite a famous. I think it's in the National Gallery in London. That painting by Paul Delacroix called "The Execution of Lady Jane Grey."
Oh yeah.
She was a redhead, and it's this great paint. It's a print of the painting. So it's been wonderful. I love her stuff. So I've only known a few of her poems, and now I've got a good collection of the stuff. Things like "Green River Rising," "Bombshell," "The First Blonde," "What Gentlemen's Prefer," and Sexton's Last Letter to God. Bloody marvellous, yeah. And speaking of marvellous things, the person I want to talk about this week, before I get too sidetracked off onto Dundee and places like that, is a poet who I've been aware of pretty much, certainly through my teens and later teens, growing up as I did on the North Shore in Auckland. And there was a fellow around the place, his name was Michael Richards, who was well known for his V8s and always drove good V8s. In fact, our first meeting wasn't to do with poetry, but it was to do with a V8, getting good advice from him on that.
Did you had some V8s at the time?
Well, I dabbled in it, shall we say. I owned different V8s at different times. And on this occasion, I remember going to see Mike, who was living in a cottage. I should explain, he's a couple of years older than me, a year or so, and he's been writing poems all his life, and they're bloody marvellous poems. And I'm not talking now saying I'll go and get his book, because he hasn't done a book. I'd like to encourage him to do a book, because he's a very good poet, and 100 times better than a lot of the poets who do publish books, I think. And I don't mean that with any but there are some poets out there I think, well, wonder what's happening there.
No, fair enough.
They've been running on the spot for too long. But let me read you one.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an idea. This is a poem of Michael Richards. I should say, I remember he always... I knew of him before I knew Mike, and I was always impressed by the fact that although he was obviously able to go straight from secondary school to university and do honours in English, he always drove a V8, and he was always a bodgy a long time before. When the hippies came in the 70s, Mike didn't stand out so much, but prior to that, all students were very trim-looking, you know what I mean, clean-cut kids who'd been to college too. Well, Mike would sort of had a different look, and it was always a good look, plus the fact that he was a very good guitarist. But let me read you a poem of his, which I love, called At the Funeral. I went for a smoke with Uncle Charlie underneath the balcony by the grass. the sea stretched out, the sun shining, the wind gently lifting the water. Strange after the car park farewell, the hearse driving between the honour guard of police and patient dogs, most of us weeping or being as stoic as we could, a young woman in a coffin in a car. But out in the front she had escaped, pointing to the cold green pines of Matakana. Imagine the ghost of her walking, her toes crinkling on the wave tops, to the island and the spots she knew further out. Beautiful poem. No, he's good. And I'm featuring this poem this morning. I've been wanting to for a while, and I'm just coming across them again and rereading them, and just thinking, I'd love to see these come into a book. Could I read you another one? A different sort of poem.
So if you're reading them, how have you got, like, what form do they take?
Mike sent them to me. I should explain that we've had a long connection because back in 1987, when I did a selected poems that Penguin Books published, I got, on that occasion, I did an unusual thing for me. In fact, it's the only time I ever have done it, but I'm pleased I did it. I got somebody else to make the selection and do all that stuff. And he made the selection. Still, I reckon, the most interesting selection of poems that I've had made.
And when he sends you a poem, is it written or is it typed out? Or
We've got computers now. We're onto the computers. Have you heard of those things?
Barely.
You Google people and you email people.
Oh, I get it.
You get it?
Yeah. I'm still faxing.
Yeah, I'll read you The Gingerbread Man. This has always been a favourite of mine. They all are, actually, all the ones I'm reading. The gingerbread man walked out one day, dressed in his Friday best, with a sugarcane tie, his crust quite dry, and buttons of spice on his vest. The gingerbread man was humming a song as he strolled down Democracy Street, but the greengrocer frowned, the butcher scowled, and the big rats nibbled his feet. The gingerbread man went into a church and prayed for peace of mind, but the pews wouldn't fit his gingerbread hips, and the back bench hurt his behind. So into the hills ran the gingerbread man. He climbed up above the rain. To the trees and the birds spoke benevolent words and offered his vest, his immaculate vest. He said, "I have come again." But all the eagles circling high drove him back down to the sea, while the crabs grew claws. His voice grew hoarse, and he waved his hands at the sea. But in spite of his shouts, still the tide went out, leaving him high and dry. The gingerbread man, troubled and sad, returned to his home at 3, but his wife just smiled while his youngest child ate him for afternoon tea.
I love that.
Story of our lives. And so no, it's quite often we seem to sort of do poets who are published. I'm doing a poet whose work I hope will be published one day. You know. Here's one. We over the years, Mike and I and others like us, I guess, have had a lot to do with old boats as well as old V8s. And maybe I finished this morning's session with a poem of Michael Richards, which again is one I'm very fond of. He's always had a very good. That's why I got him to do the selection for me back in 1987. He's got a good ear. He's got a perfect ear, and he also knows about the syllabic counts of lines, which is, again, an awareness that a lot of people don't have.
What exactly is that?
Syllabic counts, setting the rhythms look after themselves, but creating some sort of discipline.
Yeah.
So you may limit your lines to 7 syllables a line.
I noticed that because in you saying that poem, you had a rhythm.
Yeah, most definitely.
That you felt comfortable with.
It creates its own rhythm. So I mean, you can go. You're freed up. Yeah. I read this one. It's written in a sort of very tight form. It's just a short poem, and it's called. I mean, even the title was quite a hard title to say, which I like. It slows you down. It's called "Down the Webbed Steps." Down the webbed steps. Wet bushes brushing me, seeing the dilapidated boat rocking on its graveyard, another visit to an old friend at twilight time. Tide is rising, the steely water pours past the ship. I clamber with difficulty on board. Down below a barrier crayfish for dinner, a clean cabin, the master alone tidies ship. We talk about that, two aging men with impossible dreams eye each other across the table, Riley remembering the slick suits of youth, our younger, deceiteless faces. It is still a pleasure to see him. Here lies like truth, and know he knows that I know. The hulk surrounds us as we laugh, and will be sold tomorrow or sometime. The situation is desperate, but the night is young. The hull slides easily in the water, and we pour another glass down below.
Nice.
So there's to Michael Richards, and may everyone have a little something or a little more for the weekend.
You too, Sam.
Okay, Wammo.
I'll see you next week.
I'll talk to you in Invercargill next week.
Oh, okay, from the deep south.
I'm in Invercargill. I go to Invercargill for a night, and then Invercargill for the second night, and then Sydney for the next night. So I'm away for 3 nights. Invercargill, Sydney.
All right, until then.
Until then, Wammo.
Cheers, Sam.
See ya.
That was a little something for the weekend with Sam Hunt, only on Kiwi FM.